Yeah, I know I promised this would be the differences between the Catholics and the Orthodox. I'm going to take a break from that. Pretty much covered all the a lot of the major foundational things that are really shoot Orthodoxy into a different trajectory than Catholics. Or actually, Catholics want to get shut off. They're the ones that broke away from us. Um, I want to talk about differences between Orthodoxy and something else. Gnosticism. And Gnosticism was a small, excessively, extremely small movement that died off. It existed among monks. Somebody had wrote me, well, if your version of Gnosticism, if what you say about Gnosticism is true, then it couldn't have survived. It didn't. There is no Gnosticism. Any of the groups that claim to be the Thelemites, the Gnostic Church, Gnostic Catholic Church, is not Gnostic for all. It's Aleister Crowley, after he tried all his satanic stuff and black magic, created a Thelemite religion, which is kind of the it's I would say Egyptian. I'm trying to write the right words, but it's the view of the Egyptians that was around in the Renaissance. It's not an accurate portrayal of what Egyptian religion is, because since then we've come to know a lot more. It wasn't really until years and years after the Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone was around the 1820s. That it was deciphered. Even though Crowley lived in, I think he died in the 40s. His heyday was in the 20s, and around the turn of the last century. But he really still had this view of the Orient and Egypt that was really a view from the Renaissance. It wasn't an accurate portrayal. The Orthodox, or what we call the Catholic Church, the original, not the Roman Catholic Church, but just the church as a whole, universal church. I'll use that word. Anybody could join. That was the thing about it. Barbarians, Greeks. It mentions this even in the New Testament. Men, women, and it shows women preaching and everything, doing all the roles of men. And in the Eastern Orthodox Church, we called Mary Magdalene the 13th apostle. We called her that since the beginning. The Gnostics, however, didn't have women. They didn't like women. They thought women should be reincarnated. A lot of the Hindu movements of the 70s, the hippie women that would follow them would amazingly say, well, the most foolish man is more intelligent than the smartest woman. It's kind of a strange thing to say. Really anti-women's lib. But the Gnostics had a view that the soul was pure good and the body was pure evil. That and even every part of the material universe was pure evil, and God was not in anything in the material world. God could not; his energies couldn't even come in the material world. It was spirit realm, and the spirit of their God was androgynous, ambiguous. It was kind of like a blind force, where the Orthodox believe, the Universal Christian believe, that matter and spirit both start out good, but can be corrupted. The Gnostics thought spirit absolutely could not be corrupted. They believed in two gods: a good God and that was totally spirit, and an evil God which would have created the world, and our souls got trapped in it. So we need this good God to free us from that. Similar to Marcionism. But Marcionism, pretty much anybody could join. But the Gnostics were only men, only free men of a certain intelligence could come and be this kind of monastic order. Now, the Gnostics, for the universal Christian, anybody could get to heaven. In fact, many viewed most people could get to heaven. As I said before, people like Origen, who was considered a heretic, but he really renounced all his heresies before he died, was a universalist. And there were other universalists that believed that God was so good, salvation would come to everybody. And the Orthodox say you can personally believe that, but that's not a stance of the church, and don't preach it. If you want to hold that view, it's considered almost a heresy of compassion. So it's not something to be taught, but if you hold it, it's not like you're cut off. It's not an anathema statement. So the Gnostics were really elitist. They were anti-physical, and they believed in an androgynous God, which made them celibate. All of them were celibate. You could not have sex. Sex was the most evil thing. Why? Because you're trapping a spirit in a physical body. It's the worst thing. It's worse than murder, because when you murder somebody, you liberate them from their body. So murder wasn't so bad, but sex, and especially conception. And what does sex do? You're in your most physical element. All of your body, your urges, your wants are directed in one way. So sex wasn't a holy act. It was the worst abomination. And this led to their downfall, because these men living in deserts, believing that sex was an abomination, of course they're going to die off. And they died off in the 4th century. Now, there have been forms of them that sporadically came about. People claim that Templars were, but there's no evidence of that. But there's been somebody who's messaging me. He's been messaging me, and I think I can mention his name. His name's Unoraza. I'd like you to look at his comments. This is somebody who's severely misinformed and uneducated. I don't mean that in a bad way. But he's read a lot of books, conspiracy theory type books, or these kind of self-help books, where people try to twist and bend Gnosticism. It's not a scholarly look at it. It's, well, they kind of thought this, and it wasn't. It's a pagan parallel kind of thing. It's paganism. Well, a feminine spirit, and I believe if you believe God is a woman, you're not a Gnostic at all. If you believe God has any sexual aspect, female or male, no. If you don't hate the act of sex, if you don't think it's the worst temptation, childbirth is the worst sin, then you're not a Gnostic. If you believe matter isn't wholly and totally corrupted, if you don't believe actual atoms are wicked, then you're not a Gnostic. If you look out and you see the beauty of nature, you're not a Gnostic. For them, nature was the most horrible thing. They looked at the natural world and they saw everything having to live upon death to be alive. Something has to die for something else to live. Even for the grass to grow, all those plants had to die to fertilize the soil. For humans, we have to eat plant and animal. The whole basis of some animals' lives, like wolves or lions, they have to eat meat. So they saw the God that made this world is a God that loves death. And the spirit no good God would ever make a world like this. Now, this view led to two extremes. Either a really restrained view of, only you can't ever sin, you can't, partake of any of these things in people. And then there were people who theorized, well, you could do anything you wanted because you weren't, whatever you did in your body, it didn't affect the soul. There's no documented cases of these groups, by the way. Some people, oh, you could do this, you could have as much sex as you wanted because it really didn't matter. You could be as immoral as you wanted. But again, you wouldn't have procreative sex. You wouldn't have the life-giving sex because you're trapping more souls. You're continuing the material world. Even a lot of the Gnostics, it's theorized. Again, we only have their scriptures. Their communities did not exist. They didn't continue. Any groups that would take Gnostic ideas, the same heresies, remember, flourish all over again and again. The Arians were reborn in Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jehovah's Witnesses had no knowledge of Arius. I mean, it's not shown that Charles Taze Russell really knew what the conflicts were in the 4th century church. Gnosticism was not for the masses, and it was not something. The idea of holding everything secret, because remember, these gospels weren't spread out and copied like the gospels that we have today. Because the gospels that we have today, what we call the four gospels, the canonical gospels, people would give them to any Christian, and they make sure they copied them down and gave them to as many people. That's why we have such vast quantities of ancient texts. Whereas the Gnostic scriptures were secret. You wouldn't go out and preach them to everybody. You take only the best to enlighten people and say, all right, here's this, but don't show it to anybody else. Because all the Gnostic literature begins, this is what James, the brother of so-and-so, Jesus said to him. Oh, I said, what I preached in the other, you could read everywhere else. Yeah, that's true. But this is even better, and this is short, and this is really what happened. And that's what they would do. They were all secret societies that wanted to hold this secret knowledge in, so they could get to heaven, so they could shed all these bodies, and they would go up eons and eons and eons. And if they didn't have the right password, they get sent to hell right away. It didn't matter what they were good or not. It's knowledge. Gnosis means knowledge. It was a secret knowledge to get past these demons and eons to get up to the highest realm of enlightenment. Whereas Christianity had the simple love of God. That's how it just crushed paganism, because it was already boiling over at the time of Constantine, and even outside of outside of the Roman Empire, there were already Christian kingdoms. If you look, there's Armenia and part of Poland became Christian before the Roman Empire did. The Visigoths, who were completely outside of the Roman Empire. Now, the Visigoths came in the 5th century, and that was after Rome had become Christian, but they had their own form of Christianity, which was Arianism. Nestorianism swept across the east. It went into Mongolia, and there was no rulers who were these kings that forced it on people. It was something that was very attractive to everybody, because men and women, in the eyes of God, were completely equal. Slaves, barbarians, and Greeks, all equal. So Gnosticism was a very elitist thing. And I wonder if this person has ever read anything in the Nag Hammadi library, if he's ever researched it. I think he uses a word again. I would believe Unoraza, or I keep trying to say Unoraza, but he has Uno, which is a masculine word, and Raza, which ends a feminine. I don't know if he speaks Spanish. It probably doesn't, but he I'm guessing it's a he. It could be a girl, probably a girl. Has this idea that the masses would have been not. No, they weren't. I mean, it's very odd to me. I don't know how this person came to these conclusions. Um, he's probably reading books of fiction and think they're true. He mentioned to me about the Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code was fiction, and there's been several books and documentaries written on it. Even the writers of Holy Blood, Holy Grail sued him because they said, we came up with this story. This isn't real. We came up with this hypothesis, and you stole it from us. It's not, because if they're writing work of history, they couldn't do that. But they know this isn't. If you read on the side, it says fiction. So this is very confusing. I'm just replying to this as just as a general thing. And the message he sends me are very incoherent. I read one of them when I said in the answer to questions one. So it's all very strange. I would urge this person to stop using the word Gnostic. I know they kind of like that, and it sounds mystical and ooh, but none of their beliefs that they've talked to me about are Gnostic in the slightest bit. You don't hate women? Oh, well, you're not Gnostic. Sorry. It's just the I'm just telling you facts. I'm not trying to be mean or arrogant. It's just the facts. This is just facts. Like the Gnostics, they're the ones that are arrogant. That's their religion of arrogance.